Welcome to PHT in the Morning with your host, Pastor David Miller from the Pentecostal Holiness Tabernacle in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of PHT in the Morning with Pastor David Miller. And I will be your host. I'm Pastor Miller, will be your host again today. And on this episode, I've really been praying about, there's a lot of people right now, they feel just so overwhelmed with certain things, certain situations. And I've been praying, what can I say? What can I do that be a help or be a blessing to them? And I looked at some scriptures here in Psalm 61, and I really feel like that this is what the Lord would have me do our podcast on today. We're going to be talking to you from Psalms chapter 61, verses 2 through 4. Those verses say, "From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a shelter for me, and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in thy tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covert or covering of thy wings." So, here the psalmist is definitely talking about this feeling of being overwhelmed, or an overwhelming feeling in his heart. And he said, what will I do? This thing is so overwhelming. What shall I do? He said, so no matter where I'm at, from any end of the earth, I'm going to cry to the Lord. So if you felt overwhelmed, let me say first, before we really get into this episode, you need to cry out to Jesus if your heart has felt overwhelmed. And secondly, he said, if I can't get there, he said, somebody lead me to that rock that is higher than I. So the rock, we know that's Jesus Christ. The Bible talked in 1 Corinthians there about the rock that followed them. He said that rock was Christ. When Jesus talked about to Peter there about when he said, who do men say that I am? And Peter said, some say you're John the Baptist, some say Elias. Jesus said, who do you say that I am? He said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus said, upon that rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. But there's many, many, many other scriptures, but Jesus Christ is that rock, the rock of our salvation, and he is a shelter to us and a shelter for us. So if your heart's been overwhelmed, cry out to Jesus, and some way, somehow, get to the rock, get to Jesus. I want to talk to you about something here today, and like in your life, if you're anything like me, I'm sure most people are the same way. There are times that we feel so overwhelmed. The things in our life that's taking place, or not just in our life, but maybe around us, they just seem so overwhelming. What will I do? I think all of us have had moments just like that in our life. I've had someone tell me recently, it's all I can do to stay awake through the day. I've had others tell me recently, I can't sleep at night because of worry about the things going on around me in this world and in my own life situation. So whether you are not able to keep awake through the day or can't get any sleep at night because all of these overwhelming things, we need to take them to Jesus. We've all been tired. We've all been run down by life situations. There are just times that we even feel like Everything and everybody is against us. And that's probably not true in most cases, but sometimes those thoughts come to us. And that's why I think this psalm is perfect. Like verse 2, we mentioned, from the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. Number one. Number two, when my heart is overwhelmed within me, or he just said overwhelmed, lead me to the rock. What does it mean to have your heart really just overwhelmed? I think it means when everything in your life seems like it's all gone wrong. When everything around you is going wrong. I do think that that this is a perfect person to say this, and that being David, the psalmist. Most of us, I think, would agree that David was the author of Psalms, or at least most of Psalms. And he often found himself in some situations that he felt like the whole world was against him. I want you to just look at this for a moment with me right now. He was taken from his father's flock when he was just trying to be a simple sheep herder or a herdsman over that flock. He was taken from the flock of his father. He was assigned first to be the bodyguard of the king. Later on, he was elevated to become a personal musician for King Saul. Why was that? It was because Saul was overwhelmed. It was because Saul could not get any rest, and he was tormented by evil spirits. Now, that's not my opinion. That's what the Bible tells us. So in those tormenting times of his life, it was David that they said, come here and play on your harp. And when David would play so skillfully on his harp, those evil spirits would leave Saul, at least for a time. So David knew what it meant to not only be overwhelmed himself, but to be around people who was also overwhelmed that he had to play an important role in their life. Also, David was constantly sent out into battle. Eventually, he was hunted down by the king himself. I mean, I could talk to you first about David and Goliath, and how that when he was just a boy and his brothers was so torn up, and it looked like that the Philistines was going to win that battle. The king was afraid. His brothers, who was battle ready soldiers, they were afraid. David said, I'm not afraid. And he went out and faced Goliath with 5 smooth stones and a sling. And he won a great battle. So after this, David was constantly sent into battle over and over and over. Eventually, David was hunted down by King Saul himself. And Saul knew that God's favor had left him. And he also knew that the favor of God had been given to David. So you could see here why I'm telling you this. David was a perfect one to write this psalm and say, when my heart's overwhelmed within me. If you listen to all these things I'm telling you, it's no wonder David felt so overwhelmed. Not only that, but David's own failures haunted him in his life. David had made horrible mistakes in his life. If I had time, I could tell you the story of David and Bathsheba, and the failure that he made there was so terrible. That haunted him, the sin that he committed. I don't know who I'm talking to, but maybe, just maybe, it's the battles of life that you've been in that has you overwhelmed. Maybe it's because that every time somebody's in a bad situation, you're the one that has to deal with that problem. I don't know. Maybe you've made some tremendous failures in your life and even sin. I don't know. But life is very overwhelming. I do know that. Now, not only that, but even after Saul decided to spare David's life, David was assailed by warring nations rather, in his own sinful desire and by his own sinful desires. So I could talk to you on and on and on about David. We see some of the reasons that the writer of Psalm 61, verse 2 through 4, would use those words that I gave you today when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock. But talking to you, who you're probably not a king or a shepherd boy, or maybe not even a great musician, but no matter what reasons or what cause that you have to feel overwhelmed, you may be overwhelmed today as I speak. Maybe you've lost a loved one you cared about, that's passed from this life, and that's troubled you. I don't know, maybe you've lost a job and you're wondering, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive and feed my family? Maybe you've been to a doctor and got a bad diagnosis. And I've got a friend right now I dearly love so much. I love her pastor, her church, her mom and dad. She's got a terrible diagnosis right now and things don't look good. But to her, I would say, lead me to the rock. I talked to someone just the other day that was telling me about their son. They said, my son is so critically ill. Would you please pray for him? And I am praying for him. But I would say to that man who told me that, lead him to Jesus. So maybe you have had a bad diagnosis, but God is still in control. I don't know, maybe you've had some calamity in your life, some disaster that's come by. Not long ago, there's a church, and some of you listening may know of this church, around the Dayton, Ohio area. I knew their previous pastor most of my whole ministry for many years. And they've got a real good young pastor there right now. And just a week or so ago, lightning struck their church and they had a total loss. That would make you feel overwhelmed. And if I could talk to that group, and if you're that group listening to me, I know some of you will, look to Jesus. He's the answer. I know right now you're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe some disaster, like we said, that could be it. I don't know, maybe a temptation has come upon you that you knew you shouldn't give in to, but you gave in to that temptation and you failed God and you sinned. What would I say to that man or woman? I say this: sin is not good. You shouldn't have. But if you have, you know what? The Bible said that we can go to Jesus with that. He said, I write to you that you sin not. But if you do sin, you have an advocate with the Father, meaning you can go back and cry out to Jesus and he will forgive you of your sins. So, I don't know, maybe all these things happened to you at once, kind of like Job. We had a Bible school student preach to us this past week at our church, and he mentioned that in all those cases, the Bible said when one was yet speaking, another one came with another bad report. So these things may be coming upon you one thing at a time, just over and over and over, and you're thinking, oh my, how can this be? And you can feel so overwhelmed in your heart. But I'm telling you, God is able, if you will just trust him, and just believe in him. God is so good. God is able if we would just come to Jesus. Remember those words, when my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock. David fell to his own sinful desires. If you have, pray and ask God for help, and God will come to you. The cry of David's heart, in this time, he was weary. He was sad at the time. His cry is a broken cry, asking God, please hear my prayers. And that could be your cry. That could be your prayer today as well. Is your heart overwhelmed? Is there sadness in your heart? An everyday sadness or a spirit of exhaustion? A resignation that's not normal? Tiredness? A deep struggle in your life that's going on? I don't know. But all of this being said, if you feel like you're just worn out by the cares of this life, what can you do? You can cry out from the end of the earth or from the very depth of your soul saying, God, I believe you. You've been a shelter for me, and I'm praying that you would shelter me in these times as well. Praise God. Well, I hope that I've been a blessing to you today, and we're getting ready to wrap this session up with you. But I want to ask one more time, is your heart overwhelmed? Are you distraught? Do you feel like you're at that point, I just don't know what to do? Everything is wrong. I tell you what to do. And you may say, well, Pastor, that's so simple and not easy as you think. I never said it was easy. But if you'll cry out to Jesus, lead me to the rock that's higher than I, because truly, Jesus is above and higher than all of your problems. Lead me to the rock that is higher. Remember that. He's higher. Christ's power is above your tiredness, your weariness, your discouragement, your sickness, your heartache, whatever it is. Jesus is higher than that. Thank God. And my prayers is with you today. If your heart is heavy, I'll say one more time, look up to Jesus, trust and believe him. This is Pastor Miller, and I hope that this session of our episode, or our podcast rather, has been a help to you. And I hope that you tune in again with us at PHT in the Morning with Pastor Miller the next time. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.